Just a note for people who are joining in the attendees who have been joining us this past few days or who may generally come to basic classes, we're doing things slightly different today in that we will not be sending you an invitation to a panelist because we have a full panel of people, and to allow them to talk back and forth, we're going to not be promoting you. Please make full use of the Q&A in the chat or the raise your hand function, because we want to hear from you and I want to make it so that you can speak. And with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So welcome back, everybody. There's a bunch of returnees here, and I see some new names and faces joining us today on the third day and final day of this seminar on Jewish perspectives on organ donation. I'm not going to do a long introduction, but I'll just note that this is our third session in this slot, dealing with living donations, kidney donations. We spent the first morning speaking about some of the halachic and Torah sources which might inform our understanding of kidney donation as a desideratum or otherwise. We left off firmly in the desideratum side of things. Yesterday, we heard from Rabbi Josh Sturm, who is the director of outreach at Renewal, who I know a number of our panelists know, and he actually helped connect me or reconnect me with some of you. And he spoke a bit about his organization's work, as well as laying out some of the ins and outs and doing some Q&A about the practicalities of organ donation and reception, if that's the right term, to receive an organ. And today we have the real privilege of hearing from four individuals who will share their own stories, so that people can get a window into the lived experience of receiving and or donating a kidney. Everyone, we have four panelists, and I'm just here just to facilitate. Everyone who registered for this event has had access to the full bios, but I'll just note briefly that Daniel Reifman, who is a longtime educator at Risha, as well as the Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies and the Institute for Advanced Torah Studies at Bar Ilan, has published and lectured widely on topics in philosophy, halacha, Jewish medical ethics, and Tanakh. And he actually will be teaching right after this seminar, right after this slot at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, continuing his three-part series on posthumous donations or the brainstem death controversy. So that's Brian Reifman. We'll go first. Judy Singer. Judy, welcome. Judy moved to Israel from the U.S. 40 years ago and lives with her family on Kibbutz Meirav in northern Israel. And she writes that in 2013, after reading an article by Dr. Devorah Steinmetz, and I should note that Dr. Steinmetz is with us, attending the seminar. We're honored to have you here, and hope that you might perhaps speak up as feels appropriate. But Judy, after reading an article about Dr. Steinmetz's kidney donation, she donated a kidney to a stranger, and in 2015, Judy began serving as the vice president of Matnat Chaim, an Israeli nonprofit that promotes altruistic kidney donations. So Judy's here primarily qua herself, her own story as an individual, but Judy, as we discussed, as is relevant to share some of your information about your work, please do so. And just to note, Judy, I know that you're a little bit under the weather, so we thank you for being with us, and we'll be with you as well, and make adjustments as necessary. On the recipient end, we have Eliza Abrams Koenig, who is the director of student leadership at Yeshiva University, has served as YU director of alumni engagement, assistant principal at YU High School for Girls, director of student life at Stern College, and director of Jewish service learning for the university. She's a member of the inaugural Wexner Fields Fellows Program. She has spoken worldwide about her experiences as a kidney donation recipient and on surrogacy as a means to building a family. So Lisa, thank you very much for being with us. And last but not least, Tammy Feintuck. Tammy, thank you for being with us. Tammy is originally from Brazil, but has been living in Boston for the past 20 years with her husband and children. As a social worker, Tammy is passionate about helping people. But almost 7 years ago, she was on the other side of the helping exchange, she writes, and received a life-saving kidney. So welcome, Tammy, and welcome to you all. And we're going to begin. We're going to begin with first Daniel and then Judy on the donating side, and then Eliza and Tammy on the recipient side. Each of the panelists will speak for approximately 8 or so minutes, give or take. And then we'll open up for Q&A. And I really hope I have my own questions. I hope the panelists might, or if the panelists have questions for each other as you're listening, I think that could be powerful to hear from both of your questions and answers. And of course, everyone who is here, who is attending, as it were, as a listener or as a student or a learner, please do share your questions. We really hope to have a back and forth. So without further ado, I'll hand it over first to Daniel, then to Judy, then to Eliza, then to Tammy. Okay, Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. The truth is I haven't really spoken about my donation in any public forum aside from very perfunctorily shortly after I donated. I donated a kidney about a year ago. So it's still relatively new. One of the things that you don't do for the year after donating a kidney is fast, except for Yom Kippur, and even on Yom Kippur, you're supposed to drink. So Asar B'Tevet on Friday was my first fast day. I'm a little out of practice. I forgot to detox from caffeine and had an unusually difficult fast for that reason. I guess I should start for what was for me the beginning, which is teaching Jewish medical ethics, which I did, as I mentioned in my other session, at a Drisha Lunch and Learn many years ago, probably at this point about 20 years ago. And one of the topics that we discussed was organ donation. And organ donation was a topic that when it became medically viable in the 1980s was still a little too edgy for some halachic authorities to endorse. And one of the earliest halachic authorities to endorse it really full force was Rav Moshe Feinstein, who goes so far as to say that one really should do this if one is able. In other words, it's not a chiyuv, it's not an absolute obligation, but he strongly endorses it if one is able. That really made an impression on me at the time. His tshuva is a fascinating tshuva. I actually wrote about it in an article over the summer in the Times of Israel. For those who want to Google it, it's still I'm sure it's still online. His analysis is really interesting, but he really drives home the point this is something that should be encouraged, not among something that is permissible, but something that really should be encouraged. And I thought to myself at the time, okay, maybe someday. I still had young children. I thought this is maybe the kind of thing that I shouldn't try to do right now. And that little voice in my head kept saying something every time I taught the topic. And then, like Judy, I was inspired by Dr. Doris Steinmetz when I heard that she donated. She was the first person I knew who had become an altruistic donor. And then that voice got a little stronger. And then finally, about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago at this point, a neighbor down the block from where we live in Israel, in Yad Binyamin, donated her kidney to the father of a mutual friend. And I thought, maybe now's the time. As soon as I heard that she had donated, I called up Manat Chaim and got the ball rolling. And at the time, it was still in the middle of COVID. It seemed utterly reckless, but I thought, okay, I'll just kind of start the process and see where it goes. And that was a good attitude because it actually took quite a long time. I don't think I appreciated at the time quite how intensive the process of the medical tests and the psychological tests really is. Part of the problem with my particular process was COVID, things were closed, everything was delayed, hospitals had other priorities. Overall, start to finish, the process took me about a year and a half. Starting from basic medical tests like an ultrasound of my kidneys to make sure that that I had healthy kidneys, to various kinds of blood tests, and every time I thought I was done, there was one more test. I hope this isn't getting too graphic, but it just to maybe drive home some of the less comfortable test that one goes through. I was talking to the I did my let me back up for a minute and explain. I'm sure Judy will explain more about this. In Israel, at least, Manat Chaim is a wonderful organization that facilitates and kind of greases the wheels of kidney donation, live kidney donation. They also are instrumental in pairing donors and recipients. But after the initial contact with Manat Chaim, you choose a medical center that does the donation, and then you're really you're really led by the surgical team or the transplant team at that particular hospital. For various reasons, I chose to go to Sheba Hospital, which is the largest hospital in Israel, in Tel Aviv. And they led me through the process. At one point, I was meeting with the transplant coordinator, and she said, "Well, now you need to do a 24-hour urine collection." I said, "What do you mean?" She reached behind her and pulled a jug, plastic jug off the shelf. I said, "Really?" She said, "Really." For 24 hours, you collect all of your urine in this jug because they want to make sure that over the course of a full day, you have a healthy urinary system. And then and you carry this jug around with you all day, wherever you go. I don't think I've ever said Asher Yatzar with as much kavana as I did on that day when I thought, here's something that I take for granted that I can simply urinate, that not everybody can do. As the process dragged on, they tried to match me with one recipient, they tried to match me with another recipient. And parallel to the process of the medical testing, they also do a series of psychological interviews, tests to make sure that you are of sound mind and know what you're getting yourself into. And this, in some ways, was even more difficult than the process of waiting for a match or doing the testing, because when they meet with you, you go over basics of your life. How did you come to this? Where are you from? What's your community like? What's your family like? And then get slightly more invasive. Is your family supportive of what you're doing? Are you doing this out of peer pressure? And then to a series of questions that are even more uncomfortable, such as what would you think if in a year's time you see your recipient smoking on the street corner? In other words, not taking care of their body the way that a kidney recipient should. What would you think if the kidney donation fails, as 5% roughly of kidney donations do? And it really forced me to think very deeply about what I was doing and the kinds of the kinds of factors that were really out of my control. And this is the point that I feel like is most important to make in terms of my own experience, which is I dealt with the feeling of being out of control really by embracing it and saying, you know what, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my part. I'm just going to donate, and I have to rely on the surgical team anyway, and therefore I'm simply going to say the kidney, as soon as it's out of my body, is really not mine. Given the opportunity, when they said, "Is there any particular profile of somebody you want to donate to?" I said, I really don't feel like it's my role to ask who I want to be the recipient of my kidney. I said, really, once I'm giving it, it's not really mine to control in any way. And I got a little pushback from that on that point from a number of from the psychologists and ethicists that I met with. They said that sounded a little extreme, and they were probably right, but I didn't know any other way of really dealing with the uncertainty of the situation that I was that I was entering into. I'll just close by saying, thankfully, when the time came to donate, it was somebody who really desperately needed my kidney. He had another donor who pulled out at the 11th hour. Again, it's not something for me to judge or for him to judge. Thankfully, the donation went fine. He had my recovery was extremely smooth, as these things go. My recipient struggled not with holding onto the kidney, but with some infections that became very, very virulent, and it took him a number of months before he was really cleared health-wise until doctors really felt confident that he was going to make it. But thank God he is doing quite well. And we just had the year anniversary meeting. He made a Seudat Hodaya and invited me and my wife and children, and it was really, really a lovely evening.
Thank you so much. And we'll have opportunity to, I hope, ask more questions about your experience, Daniel. Everyone, I just encourage you as you're going to, we'll take questions at the end. As you're going, encourage you people to jot down their questions so you don't forget. Okay, I'll turn it over to Judy. Judy, welcome.
Hi, I'm Judy Singer. Thanks so much for the invitation. I hope that I won't have an uncontrollable coughing fit while talking to you. I'm going to do my best. I donated a kidney a decade ago, a little bit at the end of Sukkot in 2013. So just a bit more than a decade ago. When I donated, also, just as Daniel said, I guess it's a coincidence, I don't know, but we both read an article that Dr. Steinmetz had written. And as far as I didn't know anyone who had donated a kidney. I didn't know anything about kidney donation. But I read this piece that Devorah wrote about, I remember that she wrote there that people thought she was crazy. I mean, back when she donated a kidney, really was extremely, extremely unusual. And she said that she needed to find a way to explain herself to other people. And what she came up with was, I've been through periods in my life when people gave my family a lot of help in ways that I didn't feel able to return. And, I didn't want to make meals for people or whatever it was. And I decided to do something, the sort of pay it forward idea. And I think I read that piece that she wrote about 15 times in a row. And it's just something just clicked. And even though I didn't know anything about kidney donation, I knew at that moment that I wanted to donate a kidney. And I think that particular attitude is really common for a lot of people who do end up donating kidneys. When I speak about my kidney donation, which I do quite a bit, or I used to do, certainly quite a lot, I could be standing in a room with 20 or 30 people, and I can see on the faces of the people in the room, I know who's going to come up and talk to me afterwards. I can see the people who are just like, click, this is what they want to do. And I think that's common to a lot of kidney donors. So I got in touch with Matnat Chaim, which is an organization that was pretty young at the time in 2013. It was started in 2009 by a Haredi rabbi named Yeshayahu Heber, who lived in Jerusalem. And he himself suddenly became ill with kidney disease and went on dialysis. And about a year later, a friend donated a kidney to him, and he got off dialysis and he regained his health. And it was very, very, very unusual back in 2007 that someone received an altruistic kidney donation. It didn't really happen back then. And after he received his kidney, he decided that he was going to dedicate his life to finding people to donate kidneys to strangers so they could get off dialysis. And everyone, including his wife, thought he had lost his mind and knew that there would never, it's not like it's going to become a trend. It's not like it's going to catch on, that people are going to go through surgery and donate a part of their body to a stranger. But a few years later, it became a trend and it caught on, and people are lining up to donate parts of their body to a stranger. It's a really uniquely Israeli phenomenon in many ways. Sort of the family feeling that people have here. Matnat Chaim has now facilitated, since 2009, has now facilitated 1,566, I believe, as of today, 1,566 kidney donations. And due to the work of Matnat Chaim, Israel is now the world leader in living kidney donations per capita. And it came out in a World Health Organization report. It's already the second consecutive year. And it's pretty amazing. And it really is a phenomenon that has caught on here very much in the national religious community and the Haredi community. Also in the secular community, but less. There's some catching up to do among the non-religious public. My process was pretty similar to Daniel's. Didn't take as long. I wasn't during COVID. Took me about half a year from beginning to end. And I'd just like to say, since Daniel already opened the door to talk about the 24-hour urine collection, that it's a lot harder for women than it is for guys. So don't complain. And peeing into that little jug is quite challenging, but hopefully most people figured out that it's way easier to do when you stay home on Shabbat than it is to lug that jug around to work. So let that be a lesson to you guys. The medical testing I found to be not intrusive. I found it to be like inspiring. I mean, I always sort of said that I donated a kidney as a midlife crisis. And when you're having a midlife crisis and you go through a lot of medical tests and they come back one after another that you're healthy, I was 50 years old and I felt amazing that all these tests came back and I felt like kidney donation was a way to share the good health that I've been blessed with. And that was a really important part of it for me. But the real secret, I think, of kidney donation, which people probably don't really think about, is that, and I'm certain that Daniel and Devorah and other kidney donors will agree with me, is that I think that the donors really receive more than they give. The kidney recipients get a new kidney and a new lease on life, literally, but the donors get a real an upgrade of their spiritual lives, of their giving, of their altruism. Many kidney donors here, and I know hundreds of kidney donors because I now work with Matnat Chaim, but people are inspired to recruit others to donate kidneys. People are inspired to do all kinds of other volunteer work and good works, and it just gives you a boost. And I think it's been a huge turning point in my life. I mean, I work at it now. That's not even so normal, so it's a little bit more for me, but it's been a real incredibly inspiring and moving to find at this stage of my life, the sort of new career and a new outlook, and to know so many people who have gone through this process and feel inspired by them and inspiring others. I didn't know a single kidney donor when I donated a kidney, and with all modesty, I can say that there are about 30 people now who have told me that they donated because they heard me speak or read something I wrote, or friends of mine. We have 9 kidney donors on the kibbutz that I live on, and 35 kidney donors in the region where I live, and I was the first one, and it's just an incredibly big privilege to be able to have that in my life.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much. I'm going to, again, invite people to think of questions and jot them down. But let's now transition to Aliza and Tammy's stories. Aliza, yep, you have the podium.
Thank you. So all I'm going to say about the urine collection is that when you're a recipient, you do it many more times than one. So just putting that out there. So I did the number one question I always get about my being a kidney recipient is there a family history of kidney disease? And you're so young, how did that happen? And I'm looking at Tammy, who also looks so young. I never had a family member get a kidney transplant. There was no history of it in our family. I just was feeling sick one day. I felt very sluggish and out of it. And I guess it had been persisting for a while that I just knew I didn't have the energy. I was in my 20s. I should have had more energy than I had. And I went to the doctor. And he did some blood work and he said, you are very anemic. I really think you need to go to the hospital actually and get a blood transfusion. That's how anemic I was. And so I listened to him. And obviously when you go for a blood transfusion, they do a battery of tests to make sure that there's nothing bigger wrong. And they came back to me and they said, do you know that you have an elevated creatinine level? And I said, I don't even know how to spell the word creatinine to tell you that I have an elevated creatinine level. So for those who are unfamiliar with that term, creatinine is, in really layman's terms, basically the way they monitor your kidney functioning. And I said, okay, whatever has to happen, tell me, and I'll just, take that medicine or have an IV or whatever it is. And they said, no, this needs to be checked out by a nephrologist. And at the hospital I was in, the attending, who didn't look much older than me, and I only found out later on was actually only 1 year older than me at the time, said to me that I needed to come back and have some more extensive blood work done. And basically they said, listen, it looks like you have some kidney disease. We're not sure what's going on. It would be best if you have a biopsy of your kidneys, and then we'll have a better sense of what's happening and their functioning level, et cetera. And I said, okay. Again, I was young, I was still single. And I just said, do whatever you need to do. I just wanted to put this behind me. And I remember that when I was scheduled for the kidney biopsy, I actually had a date scheduled for that night. And I said to my doctor, can I go on a date after this? Because it's not just a blood prick, right? A kidney biopsy is actually, when I initially had one, my first one, they put me out because, as people know, your kidneys are towards your back, and they use this very long needle thing to grab a tissue sample, and then they test the sample. And he said, as long as you don't go bowling, I think you should be okay. And luckily we didn't go bowling. Instead, we went to play pool, but I was fine because I wasn't good at playing pool, so it didn't get that intense. But they came back to me and said, it seems you have scarring and a significant amount of your kidneys are actually not functioning. And I was so shocked by this information. What did this mean? I really didn't know. And they slowly began to explain to me that I would maybe one day need to have a kidney transplant, but maybe not. Maybe this is just my kidney functioning level and it'll stay stable. It'll be elevated, but it's where it's at. So I had to go back for blood work every 6 months or so. And I would say some 6 months I was better about it, and some 6 months I was a little bit negligent and didn't go as quickly as I should, but I was fine. I didn't feel sick. I just was going about my daily life. Fast forward a couple of years, and I'm still seeing my doctor once or twice a year. And he said to me, one day when you want to have a child, you're probably going to need to see a high, why am I forgetting the word right now? Sorry, when someone has like a more stressful pregnancy, high risk pregnancy, but it's fine. Like, there's so many women out there who have high risk pregnancies. You'll be fine. Okay, great. So I fast forward to 2014. I meet my husband. We get married. We're married for about 5 months, and it was Passover, and he at the time was a Hillel director, and we were spending the holiday on his campus running the Seders for his students. And I woke up that morning when Passover was starting that night and had incredible pain in my right foot. I didn't know what it was. I hadn't fallen, I hadn't tripped, I hadn't hurt myself. And because we were making the Pesach Seders, I decided to ignore it. And by the time 2 days later came along, I was in such excruciating pain, I couldn't walk on my foot. We went to the emergency room and they misdiagnosed it. They didn't really know what it was. They gave me a boot and they sent me on my way. So I went back to New York the next day where I lived. My husband and I were commuting, and I basically went to one doctor who said, here's crutches. I don't really see what's wrong. I finally went to my PCP, and he took one look at my foot and he said, Aliza, you have a blood clot. And I went to the emergency room again, and they correctly diagnosed the blood clot. And then they said, we see here that you have a history of kidney disease. What's going on here? And I said, oh yeah, I mean, I go for blood work every few months. It's fine. And basically it wasn't so fine. And they said, you really need to go back to your nephrologist. It seems like things have gotten worse. Your numbers are higher. And it began the process, and this again, as I mentioned, was 2015, of what would ultimately become my path to getting a kidney transplant. And I said to my doctor, you know, I was 31 at the time. I very desperately wanted to have a child already. And I said, just tell me what I need to do, or give me medication, and I'll do it. You know, whatever you say, I'll take care of it. I just want my kidney disease to go away. And they said to me, realistically, is that this kidney disease is not just going away. You might need a kidney when you're in your 40s or maybe your 50s. We don't know. It could be 10 years. It could be 15 years. But you're likely on your path to getting a kidney transplant. And I just said, okay. And at that point, I didn't feel that just having that one nephrologist was sufficient. So I decided to go and kind of create a team of a high-risk OB, a nephrologist who worked with him, a few other doctors that would help be my team. That way I could get my kidneys under control and have a baby. And every single one of them said to me, Aliza, you need to take care of your kidneys first. You need to push the baby piece out of your mind. And I was devastated. All I wanted was to have a child already. So my nephrologist, now this is my second one, said to me, we're going to do a regimen of cortisone, right? Of prednisone. And we're going to see if that helps slow down your kidneys. What was supposed to be, I believe, a 4-month period was the worst 6 weeks of my life. I put on 30 pounds in 3 weeks. Like, I just exploded. I had every adverse reaction to the prednisone. It was terrible. I couldn't bend my fingers. I was just so swollen. Literally, my sheitel did not fit my head. Even my head was swollen. It was crazy. And I was in the emergency room twice. And luckily, the doctor had the humility to say to me, I actually think you're out of my league. I don't think I can care for you. I would recommend you go into Manhattan to Cornell Hospital. There's an amazing doctor there who specializes in nephrology and hypertension for women in their childbearing years. And I called this woman's office. Her name is Dr. Phyllis August. And this little old lady answers the phone. And I say little old lady because if you heard her voice, you right away have a picture of what somebody like with that voice sounds like in your head. And she answers the phone. And I said, hi, my name is Aliza. And she immediately bagels me and says, oh, Aliza. And she says, I'm Jewish too. I was like, thank you for that information. And when she got my date of birth and heard how young I was, she said, Dr. August is really booked for the next 8 months, but I'm going to get you in. And I really feel that woman was a part of saving my life because she got me an appointment right away with Dr. August. And Dr. August said to me, here's the reality. After reviewing my blood work and everything like that, she said, it's not a question of whether or not you're going to need a kidney transplant. It is definitely a question of when you're going to need a kidney transplant. And again, she said, it could be in 5, 10, 15 years. We don't know, but we're going to monitor you closely. And even at that point, she recommended that I get in touch with the transplant office and start the process of finding a donor. But again, I was young and dumb and didn't feel that I was sick enough. So I kind of pushed it off. And instead, we decided to focus on something else. And she said that, because I kept asking about having a child, and she said, I really don't think you're going to be able to carry a baby. You need to consider something else. And she introduced me to the concept of surrogacy. And it was initially, again, very devastating. Here I was finding out I'm going to need a transplant and I couldn't carry my own child. I was resentful. I felt she wasn't an Orthodox person living in my life, that she would understand the sensitivity around that and how I would feel in our community. But we listened and we thought about it and we spoke to our rabbis about it. And eventually we decided, okay, because she said, you can maybe carry a baby one day after your transplant, but I would recommend that you freeze embryos now because we don't know what your health is going to be like. And it was ultimately, even though my doctors don't really take responsibility for that, the IVF process made my creatinine skyrocket. So at this time, it's now 2017, and we have started the IVF process, or now, and then slowly moves into closer to 2018. But really, it was 2017 when I was doing this process, and my doctors said to me, my IVF doctor said, Aliza, you need to go back to your nephrologist. Your kidneys are really not looking good. And I said, but okay, sure, I'll get in touch. And I was seeing them every 6 months at this point, and sometimes a little bit sooner. And I went in May of 2017, and my doctor said to me, I want you to come back again in August. We're going to do blood work again. because I'm afraid you're going to need a transplant in a year from now. So I went from maybe sometime in my 40s or 50s to needing a transplant in a year. And I was totally freaked out. I couldn't believe it. And then I came back in August again, and August 2017, and I went for blood work, and they said, Aliza, you are not gonna be able to go past February. Things are just getting worse and worse every time. And it was so crazy to me because I felt fine. I didn't feel like I was sick. I didn't need dialysis. I looked normal. Everybody thought, nobody knew what was going on. I was very private about this information. And throughout the whole process, my mom, who's actually on the Zoom call, hi mom, was with me at every appointment, as was my husband. And at that point, when they said to me, you're looking at February, you need to find a donor right away, my mom immediately asked if she could get tested to become a donor. And immediately I had this sense of calm that she was going to be my donor. Like I didn't even have to worry. At the same time, though, they said that because it's so soon, I couldn't rely on having one donor, and I needed to figure out a backup plan. So that night, I sent an email to probably about 50 or 60 people who did not know whatsoever that I was experiencing kidney disease. And I still remember that the subject line was like major life update. They probably thought it was a career change, but it was not. And I said, here's the deal. I very much am surprised and love you with this information, and I apologize for that, but I really didn't know what was going on, and things have been happening really quickly. There's a good chance that I'm going to need to find a kidney donor. My mom is being tested, but I need to find a backup. If you're interested and open to being tested, please let me know. And immediately I got a million responses from everybody saying, yes, let me know where to go. I'll get tested right away. And 10 people actually got tested right away. And I'll never forget this, secretary who was in the transplant office said to me, I've been working here at Cornell for 25 years. I have never seen one person come in with 10 potential donors. And I just said, I don't know, I guess I have a lot of really great friends. And of those 10, 5 actually matched in the initial part of the testing, but then didn't have to go further because as they were progressing, my mom was also progressing. And thank God my mom kept passing each test, and like, I guess like Judy had said, she, thank God, also was healthy and said each passing test was a real, encouragement that things were going to be good for both of us. And only in January, actually, did they confirm that I was going to have my mom as the final match. It did take, from about September to January to get everything done. And they make you retest right before the donation just to make sure nothing has changed. And my mom, she got the call. I think they actually called me. No, they called her first because they give the donor the opportunity, like Rabbi Reifman had said, that somebody else's donor had canceled on them in the 11th hour. So they did tell my mom first. Obviously, she wasn't going to change her mind. And then my mom called me crying and said, I'm a match. And I said, I know, Mom. And she said, what do you mean you know? I was like, I just knew you were going to be my match. I didn't wait for this call. I just knew it was going to happen. Thank God. And so we scheduled the transplant for February 22nd, 2018. And it was great. Thank God. It was super smooth through the transplant. And then I proceeded to have the hardest year and a half of my life. They didn't talk to me about the recovery process other than saying, this is what's going to happen. You'll be in the hospital for a few days. You'll come back for blood work and this and that. I was in and out of the hospital, I think 7 times. At one point, I spent 4 straight weeks living in the hospital. It became a joke that they gave me the VIP suite because I was like losing my mind and I couldn't handle being with a roommate anymore. It was really hard. I got a virus that I felt fine, but was in my blood. I never experienced kidney rejection, thank God, but there was times where I became dehydrated and then that made my creatinine go up again and they would keep me in the hospital till I was hydrated enough and feeling good. And it was really, really challenging. And all of a sudden, though, at that 1.5 year mark, it was like a light switch, switched and everything went back to normal and I was feeling good. And it was actually funny because at one point when I was jokingly staying in the hospital on my vacation, I asked my nurse to detach. I was on IVs 24/7. And I said, please just let me out. I just want to go get a manicure. And because Cornell is in the middle of Manhattan, I escaped the hospital, got a manicure just to feel like a human, and actually saw my doctor on the corner whose eyes bugged out of their head. And they're like, where are you going? And I said, you don't see me. And I literally just ran away because I felt like a prisoner in the hospital. And it was really challenging. And, I mentioned at the beginning the surrogacy piece. So while I was experiencing my whole kidney transplant and then the recovery, we were simultaneously going through surrogacy. And I'll never forget that actually the doctor who worked on us, with us on the surrogacy piece and the IVF, she said to me, we had found a surrogate, and she said, "You're scheduling an embryo transfer really close to your kidney transplant. Don't you think you're going to need to recover?" And I said, "No, they said I'll be back to normal within 8 weeks. I'm planning on going back to work. I'm going to take an extra 4 weeks and go back after 12 weeks. I'll be fine." And little did I know that she was really right, and that it would be really challenging and really hard. And our son actually was born exactly 1 year later on my transplant anniversary on February 22nd, 2019. So we share that anniversary, which is very sweet. And it was a real process. And taking a kidney from my mom, and I use the term taking because she obviously donated it and gifted it to me. And as someone said to us, your mom gave you life twice. And it was true. She did. She obviously gave birth to me and then gave me a new lease on life. But my mom also had a slight challenge in her recovery and ended up in the hospital for a few days. And I was overcome with this sense of guilt of like, how did I do this to my mom? But of course, she never blamed me. And she was so happy that everything was fine. And thank God she was totally back to herself by 3-4 weeks later. But it was a really trying time because we were kind of taking care of each other, and my in-laws were there and my husband was there and everybody was taking care of us. But it was really an intense time, the recovery process for me. And slowly did I begin to tell more and more people what had been going on. I felt the need to be really private about everything. And then I've since become like a public spokesperson for all this kind of stuff, which has been a really big part of also the process for me. And just to quickly share a little bit about the life after a kidney transplant. So you become a very regimented person with two things in particular. One is your medications, which you have to take twice a day for the rest of your life. And even that, until they get you to the right amount and the exact right combination, it takes time. And drinking water, right? I have to drink like 2 to 3 liters of water every day. I'm good if I drink 2 liters. And I know that I don't feel well the days that I don't drink water. I easily dehydrate. And it's something that's really become a part of my life. Everyone jokes that I'm always walking around with Poland Spring bottles. And for Hanukkah once, my colleagues bought me a case of water. I mean, I don't know how many other people got water as a Hanukkah gift. But that's been a big part of my life. And I just am so appreciative to my mom, and I appreciate this opportunity to share about my experience.
Amazing. Thank you. We appreciate your sharing. So thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Tammy, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
Hi, everyone. I think Hashem works in mysterious ways because I happen to be in the hospital now. I was admitted yesterday. So I think Hashem wants me to show you some of the downsides of being a kidney recipient, which are very minor compared to all the upsides. So I'm here just because a couple of days ago I had I think it was a virus. They're not sure what it was, but I could not keep my medications down. As Eliza mentioned, we have to keep our immunosuppressants and we have to keep ourselves hydrated. So I'm here, but I'm okay, thank God. So I'm a very grateful kidney recipient. Got my kidney 6.5 years ago, almost 7. And I was very young too. So in many ways, what Eliza said, many things relate to me. Kidney disease doesn't have to be hereditary, doesn't have to be something that genetically inherited. But I got sick when I was just 10 days after turning 27. And I have 3 kids. My youngest was 2. My oldest was 6. And I just felt like I had the flu. A couple weeks later, I developed some weird symptoms. Swelling, pain, and rashes, and I was diagnosed with a very rare viral autoimmune disease that can come after a respiratory infection like strep. So the prognosis was good because it's very not very common, but it's common in kids to have this, and it goes away. But in adults, it's extremely rare, and it causes serious damage to all organs that have capillaries. These are kidneys, intestines, skin. Usually everything heals except for kidneys. Kidneys don't heal. They either stay the same or worsen. So since then, I was on immunosuppressants to try to avoid more damage. I knew I would need a kidney. I didn't know when. They also said 10, 20 years, like Eliza. But because for some reason this condition, this viral immune condition would come and flare when I got sick or stressed, in four years after I was diagnosed, I had the flu and I was hospitalized, and my kidneys were getting more and more damaged. My creatinine was getting very high, and my blood pressure, which has always been good, was uncontrollably high. So I was admitted to the ICU. That was after Rosh Hashanah. I was in the ICU for Yom Kippur. And after that, I knew I needed a transplant right away. I was put on the list, and I thought for sure my family for sure, parents, siblings, my husband, and slowly each one was ruled out for different reasons. Husbands or wives usually, well, actually husbands only, their wives can develop antibodies against them if they carry their children. So I had antibodies against my husband. Other people in my family for weight, they were considered overweight for transplant, small health issues. So they were all ruled out. And then I had to find another way to find a donor, and I contacted Renewal, and they started a campaign for me. And just, I want to say, a month or two later, they got me a donor. And I found out I was going to have this transplant just 2 weeks before. And my donor lives in New Jersey, and I live in Boston. So Renewal arranged that all my testing could be done in a day. And so I went to New York, got it all done in a day. And that was amazing, because when my family came to Boston from Brazil, they had to stay here for 2 weeks to get work done. And another thing, in Boston, they didn't really want Renewal involved for HIPAA reasons and other stuff. But apparently most hospitals in New York and New Jersey know what Renewal does and are happy to have them on board. So eventually I had my transplant in New York, and I did not know who my donor was. I actually met him the day after the transplant. I don't suggest that to most people because I was in a lot of pain, but I was just so extremely grateful. It was a very emotional meeting. And my donor was just a year younger than me. When I had my transplant, I was 31 and he was 30. And he had, at the time, I believe, 5 kids. And it was very emotional. We still keep in touch. Every Chag that goes by, I feel that I have this opportunity to spend this time with my family because of him. So before every Chag, I send them a gift, a package of food or games or treats. I try to be creative every time. And this is my way of showing appreciation. But obviously, every day when I wake up, I show appreciation. So just going back a little bit, when I found out I really needed a kidney, I'm sorry, my watch fell, so please let me know if I'm going over time. I had only 10 or 11% of kidney function, and I could choose to start dialysis or wait for a transplant. And I was very hopeful that I would get a transplant. And I knew that if I got on dialysis, I would create more antibodies. I don't know if this is something people know, but if you're on dialysis, you create antibodies. And dialysis only does about between 10 and 15% of kidney function. So I was on 10%, and my doctor said, as long as I'm not vomiting, I can wait. And then if I really need it, they'll do dialysis through my neck and we'll be okay. So every morning when I woke up and I said, Modéani, the prayer of the morning, I really thanked Hashem. Okay, I'm not vomiting today, one more day. And it kept going until my transplant. And another thing that kept me going was the emunah in Hashem. That emunah doesn't mean that things are the way we want it to happen, but it is what Hashem does, and we believe in Hashem. And so I really trusted that whatever it is from Hashem. And I also work with people who have a lot of trauma that are very severe. And when I would just compare what I was going through sort of with them, I would be so grateful, like, thank you, Hashem, this is my problem. And I don't have all that trauma that they are carrying. And I also think my experience affected my family in a positive way, because my kids became so much more empathic. My daughter, who's the youngest, I believe she was 4, maybe 5, she came to me and said, Mommy, I want to give you my kidney. And she couldn't understand why she couldn't give me her kidney. And, my sons want to donate too. My husband was working a lot as a physician. He never took the kids to after school activities or put them to sleep. He became much more involved. He figured out how to drive them, how to put them to bed. So I think it did affect my family in a positive way. And what else? Oh, another thing that really helped me, and I think I'm going to end with that so I don't take too much time. Sometimes I feel a little guilty that I'm taking because I love giving. It's something I enjoy, makes me feel good. My donor was speaking at an event, and he was explaining to people how he cannot have a bad day, because every time he starts feeling down, he remembers what he did and how he saved a person, a family, a community, and that keeps him going and does not allow him to go down. So just hearing that gave me more strength and a different way to look at what happened, instead of feeling that I'm taking, but I'm also perhaps giving. It also gave me more responsibility that I should be using my new lease in life for as much as I can. So I started volunteering more, doing more things in the community, and seeing clients almost for free who really need. And so far, so good. I've been having a very good experience with my new kidney. I just had 3 weeks of recovery after that. And because I'm on immunosuppressant, sometimes I get sick and end up here where I am now. But other than that, it's all great. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to note that as we turn to Q&A, that I note and thank all the panelists who, each of whom, when I reached out to them and asked if they might speak on the panel, agreed readily, almost immediately, if not immediately, which I really appreciate. And as Kayla notes, I think that's probably sharing with such candor about something so personal is difficult in its own right, and I imagine has its own sort of difficulty when you can't see people to whom you're speaking. So on that note, we're inviting for the Q&A portion all the attendees to jump in as panelists if you are able to, if you like. I don't know what people's camera situation is like where you are, but you'll be invited to do that. Concurrently, I would say, are there any questions? And you can already start writing them in or voice them if you are joining as a panelist. Let's give us just a second for this to transition. Kayla, have they received already? Okay, so you all received them. Just give people a moment here. There we go. Here, people are going to start filtering in a little bit. Alan just joined us. So,
Maybe,
go ahead, Elisa.
I was going to ask a question of Tammy, if you don't.
I was about to say that, yeah.
Great. So Tammy, and first of all, refuah shlema, and I'm sorry you're in the hospital. I know for me, COVID was incredibly scary, being immunosuppressed and having a child who, who could spread germs and things like that. Can you tell me what you did to protect yourself during COVID? And for those who don't know, sorry, let me just give a quick background. Immunosuppressants basically takes our immunity level to 0. And the closer you are to your transplant, the more susceptible you are to getting sick. And the further out you get a little bit better. When I was initially flying and at anything, I didn't even fly for a year after my transplant. I would always wear a mask and gloves, and that was pre-COVID. So, you know, that was a really scary time. But yeah, Tammy, I'm curious how you protected yourself.
That's a great question. I actually felt good that most people were now washing their hands and wearing masks, something we would have to do. After my transplant, I had to commute to New York a lot because what happens after a transplant, you have to see that same team for a month. So the hospital here in Boston wouldn't take me for a month. Even if I had an emergency, I had to go to New York. So I was on the train wearing a mask, and somebody asked if they could sit next to me. And I said, no, I'm contagious. I just didn't want anyone near me. But during COVID, I was actually okay knowing that other people are also being cautious. My husband works at the hospital, so we had a plan just in case, you know, that he would stay in the basement and I would stay with the kids upstairs if anything, but that didn't happen. And in a way, I felt good that most people were taking care of themselves and I was just doing what I could do to protect myself. I hope that answered your question.
Totally.
Thank you. Alan, did you have a question, or just joining us? You are muted.
How's that?
There you go.
I'm joining because I am a kidney transplant recipient, and if you incurred a lull in the questioning, I have additional personal information to share, which is every case is unique. So, but I don't want to take time because the presenters were magnificent in covering so many important issues. But if you have time, there are other wrinkles.
Well, why don't you share a minute of wrinkles, and you know.
Well, okay, no more than 5 minutes. I've had 2 kidney transplants. The first one was a cadaveric transplant, and it occurred after I was on dialysis for 3 years, almost to the day. And people should really have to understand that kidney dialysis is not a cure. For that matter, a transplant is not a cure, it's a treatment. A transplant is a far better treatment than dialysis. And as good as the technology is, and as good as the care that doctors and nurses give in dialysis units, there's no way to substitute for a kidney. And every one of the panelists really understands that. Even if they never want dialysis, they have some exposure to it, no doubt, by visiting doctors. It is a new lease. It is truly a life. It's not perfect, but enough said. I went through everything everybody else discussed, seeking out a donor, and for one reason or another, I had a lot of people and friends and family go through the process, and in the 3 years there was nobody that came forward, and I settled on a cadaver. And the cadaver, the doctors recommended I take the transplant, even though it was a badly scarred kidney. The donor was a 40-year-old Hispanic woman who died of a stroke and had a badly scarred kidney. It was functioning. But it was a medical choice that dialysis is riskier than going through the transplant and getting an inferior kidney. That's an important thing to remember. Dialysis is not a cure, and it's not really a great treatment. Thank God for dialysis. But so for those who know something about creatinine, the panelists will understand. From day one, I never had a creatinine from the cadaveric donor below 3.5. So I was limping along with this kidney for the 12 years that it lasted. And at the time, 12 years was the average for a kidney. So I babied it. And I want everybody to understand something, and it applies to the panelists too, that, and it's something I learned from my transplant surgeon, who's an Orthodox practicing Jew, that his best, and he's transplant surgeon for like 20 years, his best clients, meaning his best recipients, are Shomer Shabbos observant, kosher people. He speculates for why that is. And the adjustment to taking the medication on the clock every 12 hours is a discipline we all learned from our youth, or if we came to tradition later in life, to pay attention to what we're putting in our mouth and to live by rules and laws. And he didn't hesitate. He said he's got by far the best patients are the ones who were from birth. And I think it's a testimony to one of the unexpected benefits of having lived in our tradition. Every case is different. My second kidney was from a living related, and it was magnificent. It's 17 years out, and my creatinine is at 2.1, which is more than adequate to stay off dialysis, and it doesn't show any evidence of deteriorating. There is complication for sure in receiving a second transplant, mostly with regard to antibodies. We're going very far ahead. We shouldn't worry about that for our purposes. What the panelists have really described is the benefit not only to receiving but to giving, and I'm moved by what I've heard in the last hour. It's great, and I'm available to answer questions if there are any, but I don't want to occupy any more time.
No, I'm glad you spoke up. Thank you so much. And Judy just had to drop off for her next meeting, but in absentia, Judy, we so appreciate your being with us. I want to end on time. So maybe I'll ask people, and then I'll also say that if anybody wants to try to ask more questions after the session, and I'll put my email here. You're all welcome to do the same if you'd like, but if anybody wants to send questions to me and I can try to get it to the panelists, there's my email, jkelson@drisha.org. But just to close, and then by the way, in about 12 minutes from now, Rabbi Reifman will be teaching. We're at the third session of his really terrific series, I might say. Final words. What should somebody know? And you can answer it either as, thank you, Tammy. Can answer either as regarding donation or kidney reception, receiving a kidney. What's one thing that you want? Final words you want people to know? Right? What should somebody know? So maybe we'll go in reverse order. Tammy, a final thought, something that people should know. Then Eliza, then Daniel.
The message I have is that it changes both recipient and donor and their families for the better. Nobody's losing here. Everyone is gaining, and it's wonderful.
Okay, thank you so much. And Refuah Shalem to you. Eliza.
I will add that kidney disease can happen to anybody, right? And as you see, certainly there's an age range here of recipients, and people should take their health seriously. And I think that we are doing good. I think Renewal is doing an amazing job raising awareness in the community. But I know other people who are currently looking to receive donations, kidney donations, and if you're healthy and you don't think anybody in your family has kidney disease, to really consider getting in touch with Renewal and seeing if you can help somebody, because it really can change someone's life.
That's terrific, and I can connect anybody with Renewal if if you're having trouble, although it's fairly easy with their website. Daniel.
I really just wanted to say also, when I entered into the process, as I said, I really didn't know where it would lead. Having the test done was enormously reassuring in terms of knowing that my own health was in order. And I would just add that I felt all through the process completely cared for by the Israeli medical system. And I know the same has been true for friends of mine who have donated with Renewal in New York. The priority is really on making sure that the donor is healthy enough to donate, and they don't want to put the donor at any risk. And I never felt at any point that that I was somehow being overlooked or being pushed to do something that I wasn't ready to do. I really felt like they had my interests at heart, and it was only when I had cleared every single hurdle and they really made sure I was physically, emotionally, logistically ready to do this that they said that I should go ahead with it.
Perfect, thank you. And Rabbi Sturm talked about that yesterday, and you can go onto our Facebook page to see his full presentation and hear more about that. Okay, I want to end on time, so just thank you very, very much to Alan. Thanks to you for jumping on. Aliza, Tammy, and Daniel, thank you very much for sharing with such candor about such a personal topic.
Can I say one more word?
Well, let me just close and say anyone who needs to leave can feel free to leave, and I encourage you to jump back on to Rabbi Reifman. Keep on talking, giving you your title when you're wearing that hat in about 9 or 10 minutes for the final session of his series. So thank you all. Yes, Alan, go ahead.
One last word for everybody. There are many, particularly the recipients, many curveballs are thrown at us. And there's only one thing I want to leave you with, and that is never lose hope. Tikva works in affecting outcomes, and I've learned that personally. If you want to ask me, I'll fill you in. Don't underestimate keeping hope alive and incorporating that attitude into your life on a daily basis. And help arrives from all sorts of circles. Never give up.
Amen. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day.